Okay, hello again, and welcome to those of you who have joined me for the third webinar of the 6 webinar series on the Private Sponsorship of Refugees program. My name is Satya. I'm a national trainer with the Refugee Sponsorship Training Program and the host for this webinar. Today's webinar is going to be on how to prepare and submit a successful application package. The other webinars in this series include adding dependents and keeping applications up to date, and it will take place on Thursday, February 2019, next week. And sorry, just trying to see. Okay. And the one after that would be on supporting settlement and integration, and it will take place on Monday, February 25th. And the final one for the series will be on preparing for month 13, and it will be on Wednesday, February 27th. This series of 6 webinars on the Private Sponsorship of Refugees program will be repeated every month until March 2019, next month, and then it will be repeated again starting in April. So there will be other opportunities for you to join the webinars in the series if you have missed any. If you want to register for any of the webinars, you can do so by going to our website, going to the training tab and clicking on webinars, and you can click on the webinar registration link, I'm sorry, to register for the webinars. So today's webinar, we will start off with a quick overview of the GoToWebinar control panel. We will look at the application process and who can be included in the application package, the new requirements that came to effect last year on May 1st, 2018, and what are the changes that happened to the application forms and the requirements for Private Sponsorship of Refugees program, supporting documents and proof of funds for both community sponsors and group of 5 sponsors, application forms, and we will have a question and answer period at the end. For those of you who may not be familiar with the GoToWebinar control panel, this is an interactive tool that you can use to communicate with me, the organizer of this webinar. If you have any questions, as I mentioned before, when I asked you to type yes in the question box, if you hear me, during the presentation part of the webinar, if you have any questions, type them in the question box, and those questions will come to me. They won't be shared with the other attendees. So during the Q&A part at the end, I will just bring up the questions that you have asked and we'll try to answer them. Sorry. If you have a microphone attached to your computer and if you have a laptop that you can use to speak through, then you can click on the hand raising icon right here. And during the question and answer period, I would unmute you so you can verbally ask your question. Right now, all of you are muted, so we don't have any background noise. So the application process for a Private Sponsorship of Refugees program, once all of the application forms have been gathered by a group of 5 or community sponsors, and all of the supporting documents have been gathered, the application package will be submitted via email or mail to the Resettlement Operations Center in Ottawa, also called ROCO for short. For instructions on how to organize applications for email submission, please see the instruction guide on the IRCC website or the instruction guide on the website, on our RSTP website. I'm going to talk about applications that are mailed. For mailed applications, an acknowledgement of receipt, AOR, will be sent via email to the individual listed as group number 1 within 30 days of the receipt of application. So this acknowledgement of receipt is just an acknowledgement that the application has been received by ROCO, but it doesn't mean it has been verified for completeness. So if you haven't received an AOR, acknowledgement of receipt via email, and if you're the group member 1 in the application forms that we will later look at, email ROCO and ask for the status of your application. So the first AOR simply confirms that ROCO has received the application. For emailed application, an immediate auto reply is sent, which confirms that the package has been received. The application package has been received. So again, this auto reply does not confirm that the application has been verified or checked for completion. It just means that ROCO has received the application. For both mailed and emailed application, ROCO reviews the application package to ensure that all of the required forms have been submitted and that they have been signed by the group members. So at this stage, there is no verification as to whether all of the required supporting documents has been submitted. If the application is complete, a second AOR is sent via email, again to the individual listed as group member 1, confirming that all the necessary forms were submitted and signed. So the second AOR is sent to the group member 1 saying all the application forms are there and they're signed, and that the application has been entered into ROCO's electronic system. A file number, which is a G number, will be sent and the file will be transferred to an officer to be assessed for a decision. So this is only checking to see if the applications has been received, they have been signed. There's no verification. It's just that all the applications are in place. So if the application is incomplete, no second AOR is sent. So if the application is submitted by mail, the application will be returned to the individual listed as group number 1, explaining the reason for return and what needs to be done to ensure the application is complete. So for an emailed application, email will be sent to all the group members explaining the reason for return. So application will not be returned, but they will be sent an email explaining why it's not complete. So at ROCO, if the application is complete and the second AOR is sent, and the file is transferred to an officer for decision, if the officer is satisfied that all group members meet the requirement to sponsor and that the group has the settlement and financial capacity to sponsor, the file will then be approved and transferred electronically to a visa office abroad for processing. So wherever the principal applicant is, their asylum country or the country they have taken refuge in, it would be transferred to that visa office. If the officer is not satisfied, the application will be refused and the decision will be communicated to all the group members and the principal applicant via email. So when we talk about the application form, we will talk about adding emails for each group members and providing email for principal applicant. It's extremely important that you give an email that you actively check, because ROCO will email the decision of the application to all the group members, and ROCO will also email during the application process to check if you have taken part in that sponsorship undertaking. So make sure that you provide an email that you check, and if you have created an email simply for this sponsorship that you're undertaking, then make sure to periodically check that email just in case you receive any communication from ROCO. Refused applications will not be returned to sponsors. So we strongly advise that sponsors keep a copy of their application package. They take a photocopy before they send it off via mail to, if they're sending by mail, to ROCO. If they're emailing, then to always keep your application documents in a folder so you can always get it back to, if it's returned to you and you need to fill out or you need to change or fill out new things, you can always add on that. So once the officer at ROCO is satisfied with the sponsors financial and settlement capacity, and they have all the required documents that we will talk about later that they have provided, and it meets the requirement. The file would be electronically transferred to a visa office abroad. If the application, when the application is received, the visa officer will assess refugee applicant or applicants to see if they satisfy the eligibility and admissibility requirement that we talked about in our first webinar, the previous webinar. So they will check this through an interview and through doing a medical, security, and criminality check. So if the refugee or refugee applicants are found to be eligible and admissible, applications will be approved and travel arrangement will be made in cooperation with the International Organization for Migration. And sponsors will be advised of the approval, and they will receive a notice of arrival, NAT, with their arrival details once they have been finalized. So the date, the flight number, everything of the refugee or refugees that they have sponsored. IOM, the International Organization for Migration, they arrange travel. So they make the travel arrangements. They issue travel documents if it's required. They assist with obtaining exit permits in countries where exit permits are required. And they provide any further travel assistance as needed by the refugee applicant being sponsored. So that's the application process in short. So who can be included in an application package? One of the common reasons for return that we come across as RSTP is that individuals who do not meet the IRCC's definition of a family are included on the same application package. And because of that, applications are returned. And this is why it's very important to know who should be included and who should not be included in an application package. So any person who meets IRCC's definition of a family member, as I mentioned before, can be included in the application package. So IRCC defines a family as a principal applicant, of somebody who is 18 years of age or older, who has a strong refugee claim. They have a refugee status document. As we talked about in the previous webinar, they are outside of their home country. They have left their home country due to fear of persecution based on a personalized or generalized violence. They don't have any durable solutions in the country where they have taken asylum in, and they have a sponsoring group in Canada. So a principal applicant, the principal applicant's spouse or common law partner, and the principal applicant's dependent children under the age of 22. It used to be children's under 19, now it's under 22. And dependent children, the dependent children's dependent children can also be included as well if the, and also the spouse's dependent children, stepchildren, if they have any stepchildren. Someone who is over the age of 22 but have mental or physical illness that makes them financially and emotionally dependent on the principal applicant, on the family unit, prior to becoming 22 can be added to the sponsorship application as well. And if the dependent children who are of under 19, 18, or 22, but they're married and they have their own family, they will not be included in the application form. If there's a 25-year-old, so say there is the same example we used in the previous webinar, a mother who's a PA, father, 13-year-old son, 19-year-old daughter, and 25-year-old daughter, then it would be two separate applications. one for the mother who's a PA, father, 13-year-old son, and 19-year-old daughter, and another one for the 25-year-old daughter, and they will be linked to the PA's application, and a cover letter would be written. So as I mentioned before, the age to qualify to be a principal applicant is 18. And there's currently a suspension regarding sponsoring minors that are under the age of 18, and there are two exceptions to that suspension. One is when the unaccompanied minor has a relative or guardian, and they are listed as a de facto dependent, as relative or of the de facto dependent, and they will be coming with them. So they will take the guardianship. And the second exception is when a minor has a relative in Canada that is willing to assume guardianship upon arrival. But apart from this, the general rule when it comes to sponsoring minors, unaccompanied separated minors under 18, is there is a suspension. In terms of eligibility, only the PA is assessed on eligibility, on them having a refugee status document, them not having durable solution in the country of asylum, having a sponsoring group in Canada, not in Canada, outside of their country of origin. Only the principal applicant is assessed on the eligibility. Everyone else, the family, the depending children, and the spouse, assume eligibility from the principal applicant. So they're sponsored under his application with him or her. But the dependent children and the spouse are assessed for admissibility. So they need to go through the criminality, medical, and security check and pass in order to be sponsored. Another thing I want to mention is in terms of age, oftentimes people always ask, what if we sponsor a child who's 18, but because the sponsorship has taken 5 years, this child has passed the IRCC defined age of a dependent children? The age is locked at time of submission. So when ROCO receives the application, and if the child is 18, that age is locked. Unless the child marries and have their family of their own, situation has changed. If they're not married and if they're still, if they're 25 and if they're not married, they would still be coming, they will be able to come with the principal applicant under the application that the sponsors have submitted. And if the children are married, then they're not considered to be a dependent and need to have their own separate application package, just like the older children, the older daughter of 25 that we talked about. Another important thing when it comes to declaring family members is that everyone that meets IRCC's definition of a family must be included on the application package. Otherwise, they will be potentially barred from coming to Canada under Section 1179D of the Immigration and Refugee Protection Regulation, IRPR. If they're not listed or if they're not declared in the application of the principal applicant, they won't be coming through the 1-year window opportunity. And if the 1-year window passes, then they won't be able to sponsor it as a dependent through the family class sponsorship. So it's extremely important that principal applicants are advised to include all the family members, regardless of whether they're accompanying or non-accompanying. Okay. And what about de facto dependents? Who are de facto dependents? A de facto dependent is a person considered to be the refugee family's, part of the family. They're integral member of the family unit, but they do not meet IRCC's definition of a family member. For example, a nephew living with the uncle who is the principal applicant. The nephew, his parents have passed away or their whereabouts are unknown. He is under 22 and he has been living with the family and he's part of the family, but he's not a spouse or he's not a dependent child of the principal applicant. He's a nephew. So to be considered as a member of a principal applicant's family unit, the de facto dependent must satisfy IRCC that they are dependent on the family unit. They're emotionally and financially dependent on the family unit that they state they are part of. This dependency, the emotional and financial dependency, and in most situations, it can be a combination of two, and they should provide evidence of this dependency. So it can be statement or affidavit, medical reports, if the parents have passed away, death certificates, showing that this person has been part of this family unit, and they should be coming with the family unit because of their dependency, emotional, financial dependency, and being left behind. It's a form of a family reunification. They wouldn't want to be left behind. So it's important to provide evidence of this emotional and financial dependency. Sponsors must submit a separate sponsorship application package for the de facto dependent. So they should submit a separate undertaking for this new person, fill out all the sponsorship forms. They should fill out a refugee application form, all the forms in the IMM 6000, and the de facto dependent should be a refugee in their own right. So they should have a refugee status document, they should meet the eligibility requirement, and they should meet these admissibility requirement as well. Everything a principal applicant must meet. The requirements should be met by the de facto dependent as well. Again, they should meet the eligibility requirement, outside of their country, left country for fear of persecution based on personalized or generalized violence. There's no durable solution in the country of asylum, and resettlement is the only option. And admissibility, they would go through a medical, criminality, and security check, and they should pass that in order to be sponsored. So you need to submit 2 applications, one for the principal applicant and their family, another one for the de facto family, and if there is a child over the age of 22, then another one for that child as well. So that's 3, and then you link them together on the undertaking and include a cover letter with both of the applications explaining why they should be sponsored together, and providing information on the relationship between the family member and the de facto, and the emotional and financial dependency between the 2 parties. Keep in mind that the de facto dependent, regardless of the age, as I mentioned before, has to satisfy the eligibility and the admissibility criteria. So unlike the family members who derive refugee status from the principal applicant, de facto refugee doesn't have that advantage, so they have to be a refugee in their own right. And in addition to that, they have to provide additional, information demonstrating that dependency of financial and emotional dependency on the family unit, just to clarify that. So now we're going to look into the new requirements that came into effect last year on May 1st, 2018, and then we will look we'll look at some of the supporting documents that should be included with the Group of 5 sponsorship and community sponsorship. And we will look at the forms and details. So on May 1st, 2018, new requirements for private sponsorship of refugee applications became effective. In terms of major changes that came to effect for Group of 5s and community sponsors, one of them is that all members of the Group of 5 and all parties signing community sponsor forms must complete a criminal record check and include a copy of certificate with their application package. A non-vulnerable sector criminality check is sufficient, but the criminal check must have been issued within 6 months of the application submission. And if sponsors have previous convictions, they should include all of the court documents showing the disposition of that previous convictions that they had. Community sponsors now have to provide evidence, proof that their organization existed as a legal entity prior to the application. So it wasn't created just for the sponsorship purposes. So they have to submit a proof that their organization existed with the application package. Organizations acting as a community sponsor must have other activities. As I mentioned before, they cannot be set up for the purpose of refugee sponsorship. They must have separate identity and activities. And the second major thing that I want to highlight is the stale date. The sponsorship undertaking must be signed and dated no more than 90 days from the date the application is submitted to ROCO. So if the application is returned, do make sure that the new undertaking that you're submitting has an updated signature and the date. So the last page, if it's returned to you for some reason for missing information and you want to submit it again, make sure you look at the date and signature and it's not more than 90 days. And because the criminality check should be issued within 6 months and the undertaking should be signed within 90 days, it's always advisable that these are the last things you do. You know, you gather all the documents, fill all the forms, signing and getting the police checks are the last thing you do before you submit the application. So they will be, they will meet the requirement for that period of time when they're submitted to ROCO. The other major change is new sponsorship cost and in-kind deduction table that we covered in the previous webinar. The sponsorship cost and in-kind deduction table can also be found on the RSTP website. Under resources, you will find the information sheet on cost table. And the community sponsors and Group of 5s have to show their proof of funds. So that's the change in requirement. I would talk in details in the latter slides. Supporting documentations to include with the application package. For Group of 5, supporting documentations include proof of Canadian citizenship, permanent residence, or Indian status. So what that means is for proof of Canadian citizenship, you would provide a copy of your Canadian passport, Canadian birth certificate. For proof of permanent residence, you will provide a permanent residence, copy of a permanent residence card, copy of record of landing, copy of confirmation of permanent residence. And for Indian status, you would provide a copy of Indian status card. Criminal record check, as I mentioned before, issued within the last 6 months of the application submission. If applicable, all the court documents showing disposition of any previous convictions with the submission. refugee status document for the principal applicant, and proof of funds, whether it's pledging from the group members' income or held in a bank trust, which we will talk about next. So proof of funds for group of fives can be shown in two ways. The proof can be provided in two ways. One, proof of funds held in trust. If you decided to keep money in the bank in a checking account or saving account or in a trust form, you should provide an original letter from the Canadian financial institution, the bank, dated within 6 months of the submission of the application. The letter must include the name of the Canadian financial institutions, the names on the account holders. You should have minimum of 2 members to the account that you create for the sponsorship purpose, an account number, current balance, the refugee's name, and it must be signed and stamped by an employee of the bank. And you should also provide the most recent account statement, signed and stamped by an employee of the financial institution. And the statement must also indicate the account number, the account holder's name, and branch information. You should also provide an explanation of how the funds were gathered on the sponsorship undertaking and settlement plan. This is very important. If you have raised the fund through a fundraising, if people have given donation, you have to clearly state how you gathered this fund. This is a new clause that IRCC added to make sure that the funds are not coming from the refugees. Also, when providing the when providing funds in a trust, when you're providing the proof, make sure you don't cash out after you submit the application, because we are receiving many refusals due to the fact that sponsors have taken the money out of the account after they have submitted the application, and IRCC has contacted them and asked them for the current bank statement, and that shows the money has been taken out. So make sure the money that has been put forth for the sponsorship remains in the bank account until the sponsorship period, the process. You can also pledge, the sponsors can pledge from the income, their personal income. At least 3 sponsors must contribute financially to the sponsorship. All 5 can contribute as well, but at least 3, minimum of 3 sponsors must contribute financially if they're going to pledge from their personal incomes. So those who are pledging, all sponsors contributing personal income, must provide a copy of their most recent notice of assessment issued by CRA, or their most recent T4 statement or most recent T5 statement, pension statement. It should be issued by the CRA. The third option is a combination of 2. You can have money in the trust fund as well as pledging from the income. Some members can pledge, and you can also have money in a trust fund, as long as you explain how that money was gathered. Okay. Community sponsors, documentation for community sponsors include, as I mentioned before, proof that the organization existed prior to the sponsorship. So what that means is, if it's a registered organization, registration document, if it's an incorporated organization, articles of incorporation, or documents that establishes the organization and a list of its members. Proof of Canadian citizen, permanent resident, or Indian status for the signing authority for the community sponsor, and if applicable, if the community sponsors are working with co-sponsors, if they're individuals or organizations. For the individual co-sponsor, a copy of, as I mentioned before, Canadian passports, birth certificate, copy of permanent resident card, permanent resident confirmation of permanent resident, record of landing, and for Indian status, the Indian status card, a copy of that. Criminal record check For community sponsor, signing authority, and again, if applicable, for the co-sponsor, individual organization acting as a co-sponsor. Again, the police check is issued within 6 months, and if applicable, sponsors, co-sponsor and signing authority, should they have any previous conviction, all the court documents showing a disposition of that conviction. Just like for a group of fives, refugee status document for the principal applicant, and proof of funds. So proof of funds for community sponsors, as of May 1st, 2018, before May 1st, organizations were able to pledge income from the organization's income. But as of May 1st of last year, the organization acting as a community sponsor or any organizations acting as co-sponsors with the community sponsors can no longer pledge from their organization's income. Can only put funds in the trust or have an individual that is a co-sponsor pledge from their income. And if the fund is in a trust, if the fund is held in a trust, a checking account or saving account, they should provide the original letter from the bank dated within 6 months of the submission date. Similar to that of the group of five, the letter should include the name of the bank, the name of the account holders, minimum of 2, account number, current account balance, the refugee's name, and it should be signed and stamped by the financial institution. They should also provide the most recent statements signed and stamped by the employee of the financial institution. And the statements also, as I mentioned before, the statement must include the account number and the account holders' names and branch information. As the group of fives, as similar to the group of fives, the community sponsors should provide an explanation of how the funds were gathered on the sponsorship undertaking and settlement plan. They should submit documentations to prove how these funds were gathered as well, similar to group of fives and community group of fives. And if the co-sponsor or co-sponsors are pledging from their income, they should provide a copy of their most recent notice of assessment, most recent T4 statement, most recent T5 statement, or pension statement issued by CRA, similar to group of fives. Sorry. The application forms. Sorry. So for the new forms, all the forms for SAWS, group of fives, and community sponsors have changed as of May 1st of last year. So now there are separate application packages for SAWS, group of fives, and community sponsors, including separate instruction guides and sponsorship undertaking for each. The only form that has changed for refugee applicant or applicants is Schedule 2. We will go into details about the forms and how to fill them out. The new forms are dynamic PDF forms that can be customized in response to user input and automatically calculates financial accounts. And because of this, all forms must be typed. ROCO will not accept forms filled by hand. And you will see that when I show you how to fill the application forms. So they're dynamic forms, they auto-fill, and they automatically calculate financial requirements. And they give you warning if you make a mistake in terms of financial requirements. So we're going to look at forms in detail. So I'm going to go out of the presentation. Oops, sorry. Sponsors form. I'm going to go to our website, www.rstp.ca. English or any language. If you speak French, then you can select French. Application forms. Going to go to group of fives first. Group of fives. If you click on the application form, you will notice that it would tell you to please wait, and it would tell you that you need the most latest version of Adobe Reader to download. So the best way to access the forms is to download them, save it. You would save it in your desktop, your documents, wherever you want to save it. You can save it, or you can right-click on the title itself and save link as. I've already saved them. So once you do that, you will have access to the forms. I've opened all the forms up. Just need to find this sponsorship undertaking and settlement plan for group of fives. So I'm going to see. Okay, so you can view it. That's good. And okay, so as I mentioned before, there are dynamic forms, and the undertaking and settlement plan has been combined. Before May 1st, it was an undertaking and a settlement plan. Now those forms have been combined. I'm going to go and I'm going to show you step by step. So group member 1, I'm going to put member 1 and date of birth. You'll put unique. This is a new addition. Unique client identification number, UCI, for any naturalized citizens and permanent residents, anyone who has applied for citizenship or permanent residence, they would have unique client identification. Those of you who are Canadian born who do not have a unique client identification number, you can just put not applicable. Relationship to the principal applicant, if any, address, you would see that email is highlighted. The new requirement is that every group member has to add an email address. And as I mentioned before, make sure that you include an email address. If you don't have an email address and you're creating one for the purpose of sponsorship, make sure you actively check that email, because IRCC will communicate with each and every sponsors to ask if you are part of the undertaking, and they would correspond with you with this email. So do make sure to provide an email, one, because without the email you won't be able to you would see all of them are red. You won't be able to submit the form. Well, you'll be able to submit, but you will get it returned. And make sure that you check it. So member 1 at example.ca, and member 2, and you will provide all the information, address, email, mem2 at example.ca, member 3, oops, not 3, but okay, and then email 3 at example.ca, and member 4 mem4 at ex.ca, and member 5. Again, I'm sorry, relationship, if they know the PA, if it's a cousin, if it's an uncle, if it's a sister, any relative, a friend, unique identification number, if they're a naturalized citizen or permanent resident, date of birth, email, mem5 at xca. And you can also add and minus group members according to how many more members you have. The minimum amount of members for a group of 5 sponsorship is 5, but if you have more, you can add more members to your application form. So section B is the refugee application, refugee applicants information. This is where you put that information. So applicant, so I'm going to put PA. PA Handallah. Handallah is the name. Let's just say given name. Male. Date of birth, country, marital status, citizenship, other citizenship if they have any. Do you have additional family members? Yes. Again, you can add and remove additional family members. I'm going to add Handallah's wife, female. If they're part of the LGBT community, they can be male. Country, marital status, relationship. So you will see relationship to the principal applicant, common law partner, a spouse, child under 22, child older than 22, and you would explain their dependency due to financial and emotional dependency due to medical or physical illness, dependent child of a dependent child. Okay, now we're going to add an accompanying. If you would add if they're not coming if they're in a different country, they can arrive, or there's reasons they're not coming together, you would put a non-accompanying, but you will still list them in order to be eligible to be sponsored under the 1-year window provision, or if that time passes, then to be sponsored as a spouse under family class sponsorship. And you can add more family members. Child of Handallah, child. Female, date of birth, place of birth. And there is, even to this, we can put no, there's no separate one for them. Do you wish to provide a separate contact information for this family member? If you put yes, then you can provide the current mailing address for that family member. This is great because if the PA and the family members are in different countries, this is useful to provide their information. And as I mentioned before, when you're linking application of a 25-year-old daughter or a de facto dependent, you can add those application with the plus and minus. And the settlement plan, D, section D, settlement plan. So this is, it asks for you to provide details of all your settlement responsibilities. So, you know, arranging temporary housing, working with them to find permanent housing. So what would you do before they arrive? So must arrange proper housing for refugees you're sponsoring. So you're going to explain what you have done, looked at market, rents, you have looked at places, you have rented a place, you have furnished a place. Everything that you have done, you will put it here. You have reached out to a settlement agency and are working with a settlement worker prior to the arrival of the refugee applicant or applicants, and you will be working with them later after the arrival. So which immigration settlement assistant agency will the refugee likely to access? So which ones have you researched? Why? For which services? So if the sponsored newcomer, if the refugee has additional medical needs that, or any special needs that they have, what are the steps that you have taken to provide or make arrangements for these needs? If you're sponsoring someone who has gone through trauma and they would like to have mental health or counseling support, so what are the organization, what are the therapists or counselors that you have reached out to? And number 4, this is regarding non-accompanying family members. So only applicable when family members are listed and declared. So if the family members cannot accompany the PA, principal applicant, then you will be bringing them under the 1-year window of opportunity provision. And If that time passes, then they will be able to come through the family class sponsorship, as I mentioned before. So what are your plans for your group's plans for supporting these non-accompanying family members who may become accompanying family members or may not come to Canada later, or who may come to Canada later under the 1-year window? So what are your plans for supporting them? And E, settlement need checklist. This is where it's more, in the previous application, it was just you checking, saying that you will do the required settlement assistance or settlement needs. You will provide the required settlement support. But right now, in this application, you have to list which group member will be responsible for each task. So meeting them at the airport, who's going to be responsible? Member one, and member 2. It's important to have, it's better to have more than one person, but on your settlement checklist, you should have at least one person. And also make sure that the same person is not doing all of the settlement activities and support, because your application will be rejected on the basis that that person cannot do it all. So it has to be a group effort. So transportation can be member 1, 2, 3, and so on. So you would just click and write who's going to be responsible for what, the names. Financial assessment, as I told you before, it's a dynamic form. Because we have listed Handala, Handala's wife, and Handala's wife, their child, one child, it has put 3 people. So the family size is 3, and it has automatically calculated the required amount, the required annual cost for sponsorship, which is $26,700. Again, this is only to assess the sponsorship's financial capacity. Once the family arrive, they will be, the group members are required to provide monthly income support based on their provincial RAP rate, as mentioned in the previous webinar. So once you have how much you need, you can estimate living costs in the expected community of settlement, and you can provide an estimated cost for furniture. So how much could how much are you going to be spending on furniture? So family of 3, say the maximum for furniture would be 2016. We will just put 500 for furniture. Clothing, we will put, say I put 10,000. Okay, that shouldn't, sorry. I'll just put 100. It's just estimate costs that you're putting forward. And for kitchen, household effects, kitchen supplies and cleaning products, sorry, let's put 300. Linens. So it's one-time startup cost. You're putting 100. Food stable, school supplies, let's put 100, it's just one child. 100, let's just put 100. Hookup costs, so rental, utility deposit, let's just put 1,500 for that. Okay. And it's showing that the annual living cost must be equal to or higher than minimum financial requirement, which is 26,700. The total annual living cost that you have is 2,700, that from addition of all of this. So monthly, you're going to provide monthly electricity and heat. So utility bills, say monthly you put 300. Food is going to be you provide 1,000. 1,000 for a family of 3. Let's just put 400. And phone and internet, let's say 150 per month. And it automatically calculates your annual cost. And pocket money and allowance, say you give 300. And transportation, $100 per Metro Pass, like transportation card. So 2 adults and 1 child, let's say $350. And other costs if you're going to give anything. So your total must be equal to or higher than 26,700, but you have 20,700. So how much do you need for your sponsorship? You need 6,000 more. So we'll just put 6,000. Oh, that's not, sorry. So that's monthly. Let's put, I'll just put 400 for now. Well, let's put 5. Okay, so 26,600 is what you have. Financial requirement for sponsorship, 26,000. Living cost, 26,000. You made it in the living cost. You didn't deduct anything in the in-kind donations. However, you can use the in-kind donation. So say you are going to subtract shelter for the family of 3, shelter is 10,000. If I put 20,000, it would tell me the amount you entered exceeds the maximum amount of deduction, because according to the cost table, in-kind deduction for a family of 3, the shelter allowance maximum is 10,632. So let's put 10,000. And furniture, the maximum amount is, sorry, the shelter is 10,000. Furniture is 2,016. Let's put 2,000. Household, and we're just going to put 0 because we're already, so let's just put clothing, 300. Linens, just put 100 because you're going to buy new linens. Household kitchen supplies, 1,000. Again, it's more, so we're going to put 500. Oh, that's more too. My school fees. School fees is $75 per child, so we put 75. And food stable for a family of 3 is 195, so we put 195. So you had 26,000 in annual cost, 700, and in-kind deduction 1,200, and financial requirement for sponsorship is 14,330. So it just takes away the 26,700, sorry, 12,670 from 26,000. Okay. And so if you have money held in a trust fund, and if you click money held in trust fund, okay, you're adding 500, you will have a new tab to explain how the funds were obtained or gathered. So it would just give you space to write as much as you can. You can just write, and then when you print it, all of them will get printed, and if it's a combination of 2, so you have 500 in the bank account, and see that's the answer you provide. Group member provides 10,000. Group member provides 5,000, 5,000, So you have 6,470 over the required amount. So it also gives you a warning that it must not be a negative amount. So another thing I want to highlight is this in your obligation consent and declaration. Any family members, this is the new addition, any family members born after the sponsorship undertaking is received by IRCC. So what that means is that applications, if there is a newborn family member after the application submitted, they will automatically be added to the application, and the group of 5 sponsors has to automatically assume responsibility for newborns. But they do have the option to withdraw if they do not consent to that. And another clause I want to highlight is providing consent to IRCC to share your contact information with us, Refugee Sponsorship Training Program, for the purpose of receiving information and training and support. So that's the other one. And as I mentioned before, it is a dynamic form that auto-formulates. So the names of all of the sponsors would be auto-filled. And again, this is the last thing you would want to do, date and sign. So it meets that stale date of 90 days before the application is submitted. So that's, you would save it. I did not save. And so we did the checklist, and for community sponsors, let me go find community sponsors, sponsor assessment. For community sponsors, you will provide the name of the community sponsor organization. Again, as similar to group of 5 sponsorship, community sponsor forms used to be the undertaking and settlement plan. Now they're both combined into one form. It's sponsorship undertaking and settlement plan. I'm sorry. And the name of the organization's president, CEO, ED, or equivalent name, the signing authority, address, again, email is very important. If you have co-sponsors, okay, so I should email signing authority at ccs.ca, okay? And yes, you have a co-sponsor. It won't allow you to go to the next, fill out the other information if you don't provide all the information. Do you have a co-sponsor? Yes. Select a type of co-sponsor. It can be individual or organization. Individual, it will give you what needs to be filled out for an individual. For an organization, again, name of the co-sponsor organization, name of the signing authority, unique identification number, email, csmc@cs.ca, okay? And refugee applicant, similar to that of the group of 5 application forms. Principal applicant, given name, family members, yes, and you would add and remove family members. And when you add family members, you will, sorry, I'm going to go a little faster with this application form because the webinar will get cut off. So adding, and then you have refugee family members, so it would be a spouse, common law partner, a dependent child, and then do they have different contact information? Yes, so you will provide the address if they don't live in the same country as the principal applicant. Refugee applicant name, because I think I kept on adding more, we can remove them. And then any linked cases of older children or de facto children, And then provide description of your organization. It's the structure, the purpose, just to show it existed before the refugee sponsorship and it wasn't created for the purpose of sponsorship. How many people are in your organization? Various roles. Do you have any paid employees, volunteers? Just providing detail. It's organization's profile, E. Just providing information about the organization. Provide brief history. When did you, when did it, who founded it? When did it start? What is the purpose of the organization? What is the milestones, accomplishments, important dates? Describe how your organization drives its income, product sales, member fees, fundraising, etc. Your organizational financially solvent. So it's how are you managing your organization? How is it run? Managing its debt, load, just detailed information about your organization, and briefly describe any sponsorship activities and any other humanitarian work the organization has undertaken in the past. So if you have made previous sponsorship, it's asking you for the G number of previous sponsorship, for the community sponsors, and any other humanitarian activities that they have taken part in. So settlement plan details, similar to that of the settlement plan details for group of fives. So arranging housing, what support structure, staffs or volunteers will be available to provide the required settlement service. So like documentations, who's going to take them where, what if it's a volunteer run organization, how many volunteers, are you planning on employing refugees within the organization? If yes, please provide it. So this is to show that the motivation of the sponsorship is purely nonprofit, and that you're not trying to sponsor people to work for you and try to get away from the requirements that are there to get federal skilled workers or to sponsor people under the work permit. So it's very important what you write in 3A. So that goes into details about employment of refugees within your organization. And then again, goes back to the similar questions as in a group of 5 sponsorship, which immigrant settlement agency you have access to, which organizations will be providing assistance to the newcomer once you have sponsored. So again, for additional needs for the refugee, including medical needs, special needs, mental health needs, counseling support, you will provide details. And managing, settlement checklist is just a matter of sponsor or co-sponsor. If you have another co-sponsor, you will have another tab, so you just click who's going to do what. And the financial is similar to that of the group of 5 application, and the rest again, it's any newborn children will be added to the sponsorship, and your information being shared to RSVP. Those are the new changes to the application form. And in terms of community sponsors, in terms of financial profile, okay, so financial profile is similar to for group of 5s and community sponsors. It's the same. You need everyone who is pledging, group members pledging funds from their personal income, and individuals that are co-sponsors within the community sponsors who are pledging funds from their personal income should fill out the financial profile form. So it's the family name, last name, The family size is your family composition. Before, it used to be the number of people who are dependent on the person filling out the financial profile. Now it has been changed to family size. So its financial capacity is based on the size of the family unit, not how many people you are financially responsible for, but the size regardless of whether spouse or children, persons that fit into the IRCC definition of a family, are working. It must, now you must list the family unit, unlike the previous application where you would only list the number of people who are financially dependent. So entry fields change if you select employed. Oops, sorry, your family size, I'm going to put 3. Just it changes if you have employed, if you're not employed, sorry, not employed, employed, self-employed, it automatically changes according to. And source of income must list the gross income, not the income. So employment income, if unemployed, then you will provide what you're receiving, if you are receiving any benefits, and then you're just declaring. For forms for sponsors, so for, that's the refugee form. Sponsor assessment, again, for both community sponsors and group of 5s application. So all members of the group must complete this for group of 5 members, and for community sponsors, only signing authorities and co-sponsors need to complete it. No need for head of the organization, CEO or director to fill this out. Different persons for signing authority, if there's different persons, then they can all fill it out. The new change to this form is L, is that in the event that you are found to be ineligible to be a party to the sponsorship, do you authorize IRCC to disclose to the remaining parties that you cannot be party to sponsorship? So basically, it's just giving consent to the rest of the group that you won't be able to, if you are found ineligible, letting them know that you're the group member who's ineligible. Because right now it only sends, the IRCC will send an email to the individual, the group member, that they're ineligible, and everyone else would receive a rejection stating that one of the group member is ineligible. So they won't say who. So you can either choose yes or no, and then sign, and you're done. So refugee forms. And so for refugee forms, no change for refugee form. Generic form used to apply for PR, permanent residence for Canada. So just filling out all the forms. You may help the refugee applicant or refugee applicants with filling out these forms. Only the principal applicant fills this form, and you will save it, and you will validate it, and if you make changes, revalidate it, and you would, once you validate it, you will have a barcode, and you will save with the barcode. So at the end, validate button will generate a barcode that Roco will scan and get all the information embedded in the forms. And sorry. PA's personal details. Dependents can be listed on page 4, and they must identify if they're accompanying, non-accompanying, and provide explanation for non-accompanying. Again, if the spouse or a child is living in a different country and they would like to travel with the PA to Canada, they should be listed as accompanying, and the visa office will make efforts to process them at the same time so they can travel to Canada together. If the spouse or dependent child is in a different country and they do not wish to travel with the PA to Canada for whatever reason, they should be listed as non-accompanying, but they should be listed in order to be considered to sponsor through the 1-year window opportunity or through the family class if more than a year has passed. It's extremely important to list all family members, everyone who meets the IRCC definition of the family member on the generic application form. Schedule A, everyone who is 18 years or older has to fill out the Schedule A and Schedule 2. So it's the principal applicant, the spouse, any children who were 18 years or older. So Schedule A asks questions about military services, address, membership in organizations, etc., some of which may be used to assess the admissibility requirement. So be accurate and truthful as possible. If someone has a membership of military or non-state armed group or political party that has that they have engaged in war crimes or terrorism, it's important to be specific as possible on the role of the applicant, dates of membership, what unit of member, what duties, what responsibility, what name of the organization, any involvement in armed conflict, must be able to explain if he or she was a member of a group and or if no involvement within those activities, they may be found inadmissible. Like if they group and they had no involvement within those activities, as they might be found admissible to Canada. So it's important to list what their involvement was. So much details as possible. And again, anybody who's 18 years of age or older, Schedule 2 and Schedule A. They should fill out a Schedule 2 and Schedule A. Schedule 2 is a new form. It's eligibility requirements for sponsorship under the PSR program and are listed on page 1. I wonder if, Schedule 2. Sorry, I'm just going to find Schedule 2, Schedule A. Schedule 2, it's a new form. Anyone who is 18 years or older has to fill it. It's for eligibility requirements for sponsorship under the PSR program. The boxes, again, are dynamic on the whole form, and it expands to accommodate more text. So it's family name, given name, details about the event which led them to flee their country, description in chronological order to exactly why the family members left and what route they took. Are they able to return to the home country since arriving? Have they returned to the country of origin? If yes, how many times? Under what circumstances? Property, if they own any property, like all the details, clear details of their situation. Since arriving, how they have supported the family. So just assist the sponsors would end up assisting the refugee applicant, and refugee applicants fill out these forms. So make sure that it's truthful and it's accurate as possible. Relatives in Canada, if they have any relatives in Canada. So the narrative in part A is very important as well. Just explaining why they left. It's one of the main things, case narrative. So do make sure that you assist the refugee applicant or applicants in providing full details of everything that happened, what route they have taken, how they are supporting themselves, what options they have exhausted, just so the visa officer can get a glimpse of what's going on, just to get an idea of the struggle that they have faced. Okay, and I'm going to actually open it up to questions. I'm just going to see if you have any questions. Sorry, I had to go a little faster. The webinar might get cut off at 2:30. I just didn't want to not miss any information. Community sponsors need to demonstrate they have other activities, programs, and sponsorship under the new requirement. Is that the same for SOS? No. So for SOS are already incorporated organizations who were functioning before they applied to become sponsorship agreement holders and got the agreement approved by Minister of Citizenship. So they don't have to prove that they have other activities other than sponsorship undertaking, because most of the SOS are faith-based organizations, so they're churches and mosques and temples and community organizations, settlement agencies. So there's no need for that because they are incorporated organizations. Because community organizations don't have to be incorporated, they need to prove that they existed before. Are email submissions better than mailed? Faster? Email submissions, you will receive a AOR right away, but it would still take time, the same amount for the for ROCO to check for completeness and verify. It's easier to send because mailing would be a huge package, whereas email, it would be divided into, and again, visit our website for details on how to submit email applications, because there's particular requirements that ROCO wants you to follow, and if you don't follow that, it will be returned back to you. In terms of signing, the last page you print, sign, and scan, you can do that. Can the following considered community organization: cleaning companies, self-employed businesses, coffee shops, grocery stores, restaurants? Yes, they can all be considered community organizations, community sponsors, as long as they have registered a nonprofit or profit organization and in good standing, they can be. There is no minimum income. Is there a minimum income these businesses should have? No, there's no minimum income because, as I mentioned before, the amount that you provide for the sponsorship cannot come from the organization's income. It could either come from, if you're putting funds in a trust, it can come from a fundraising, or it can come from a co-sponsor's personal income. They're pledging from their personal income, or a community event, or a fundraising event that the business has done for the purpose of sponsorship. So unlike before, community organizations cannot pledge for the sponsorship from their income. I'm going to stop the, I'm going to end the webinar now. I'm going to get cut off in 4 minutes. But before I go, I do want to let you all know, if I haven't answered your questions, if you think of a question later on, please do feel free to email me at stilenathan@rstp.ca or call me at 416-290-7000, extension 2406. If my email is too long, email info@rstp.ca and I will be checking that email as well. So please do email me any questions you have, and I would try to answer as soon as I can. And if I don't know the answer, I will check with my director and manager and my colleagues, and we will provide the answer. So do email me if I don't get to answer your questions today. And thank you so much for joining me today. And the next webinar on adding dependents in post-submission and updating applications will take place next week, Thursday, February 21st, 2019, from 1 to 2:30. So I hope some of you can join me. As I mentioned before, if you don't join me at that time, this series will be repeated next month, and you can join Winnie, our RSTP trainer, who will be doing next month's series. Can you put me in touch with your Atlantic Province trainer? Yes, Laura. Laura is our Atlantic Province trainer. I will send your information to Laura. I have copied your information and I will send it to Laura, so she'll contact you at her earliest convenience. I hope that helps. Okay, thank you everyone, and have a wonderful rest of the day. And do email me or call me if you have any questions. Take care. Bye for now.